Welcome to the flip side of sports, where on this podcast we talk about the other side of sports, the side that isn't on mainstream sports media, the topics that don't normally make it to your local sports channel will be here. This type of show is different from the rest. It's not a sports talk show about the opinions on last night's games or who won the trade. This show is about the flip side of sports, the topics that aren't normally talked about. Instead, it will be talked about here, where every Friday you can take a listen to people that have the experience in the world of sports and get a new perspective on the sports we love. On episode 5, we'll be talking about how some parents and coaches are having a major impact on youth development in sports, specifically when it comes to adults who make sports their kids play about themselves instead of letting the young athlete grow and develop as an athlete but also as a person. On today's episode, I have 2 great interviews with experts specializing in youth development in sports. In the first half of the episode, you will hear from Dr. David Telles-Langdon, a professor at the University of Winnipeg, who speaks to me about how coaches can best deal with parents of young athletes. And in the second half of the episode, you will hear from Dr. Dawn Anderson Butcher, a professor at The Ohio State University, where she talks about her research she did with youth coaches all over the USA and what she is currently working on. So I want to welcome David Telles-Langdon, professor at the University of Winnipeg. So David, thank you for joining me. When talking about youth development, especially when it comes to their coaches or parents who are guiding them throughout their sports journey, how much of what they see from parents and coaches do they take in when developing in their sport choice?
That's a great question, Noah. It's a huge amount. We notice that the vast majority of students that move through sports generally are going through sports that either their parents had wanted to do or that their parents did participate in. So that tends to influence where parents are going. And certainly coaches, there's research to suggest that students actually take more life skills away from coaches than they do from their parents or their teachers. So coaches are hugely important in this as well.
Because in when I played baseball, I noticed that sometimes coaches and parents, just like anybody, would get like a little too invested in the game, and sometimes they could let that show to at least like the younger kids, because at a certain age you kind of understand where to cut the line, but at that young age you may not. So for that younger kid, how would that, if it was an argument with another parent or a coach, how do you think that contributes to the player's development or just the way that person views the coaches and parents around them?
Certainly. Well, with young kids, it's really important that they not see that kind of conflict at all. As you know, with most youngster sports, we don't even encourage keeping score. Now, kids will keep score and parents keep score, but we shouldn't be having those conversations. Parents should be talking to the kids about what they did in the game, what they enjoyed about the game, what was fun, what worked well, if there were any highs and lows for them personally, and not getting into their overall performance. But sadly, we often do. And then as people progress through sports to higher and higher levels, parents get more and more involved. But there isn't really a whole lot you can do beyond being supportive. I've often said to parents when I've seen them screaming at their kids on the field, like, do you really think they did that on purpose just to upset you? Most of the time, it's something's gone wrong and it's unfortunate. And the athlete is just as concerned and upset about it as the parents are. And parents piling on really just doesn't help.
When talking about what you talk to parents about, if you've seen them screaming, what is their response in that certain, like, in the situations?
Oh, most of the time they realize they just let their emotions get the better of them, and it kind of got away. They realize they probably shouldn't be doing that, and it's really not helpful. So I try to get them to think about putting themselves in their own child's shoes. Now, occasionally I do run into parents who say, hey, I was a superstar athlete, and if I was in my kid's shoes, I wouldn't have made that mistake. And that's just unfortunate when you feel that way. I think most parents can remember times when they didn't perform as well as they would have liked to in their chosen sport, and recognize that even though their child's trying really hard, things didn't go as planned and they didn't perform up to their level.
Yeah, I get that. In movies and TV shows, sometimes you'll see that parent that's portrayed as like the hard ass, if you want to say, or like doesn't give their kid any room to grow into, like, they're on their back 24/7. Do you see that in the real world, or do you think that's just something that the movies make up for ratings and that kind of thing like that?
Oh, absolutely. That happens in the real world. I've often counseled coaches to try to take those kinds of parents because they're often your greatest boosters too. Off the field, the overindulgent parent who's heavily involved in their child is also very interested in the team. It's arguably it's better than the parent who just drops their kid off and then goes to the coffee shop, goes to Tim Hortons or something. I would far rather a parent stick around and be there rooting for their kids. But if they get if they can't control their emotions and it gets over the top, I've often said to coaches, give them a job to do, make them a statistician, give them a clipboard, keep their hands busy. And then they're watching the game and they're marking down stats. Jokingly, I've had a couple of coaches say to me, well, Dave, yeah, but they're no good at stats. And I said, you don't have to use the stats. Just give them a clipboard, give them something to do. It just keeps them busy. And then they feel important. They're part of the team. They can tell their friends, hey, I'm the statistician for the soccer team or the baseball team. And you've given them some stuff to do, and they probably become one of your strongest boosters. And then they're less likely to be totally focused on their own child. They're having to capture stats from every kid on the field.
Do you think that if the kids have gone through something with parents and they see this like on a constant basis, that impacts their growth and the way they want to pursue the sport? Or do you think that it's just like sometimes they see it and they just let it go?
Oh, I think parents can be a huge impact on kids dropping out of sports. I've talked to numbers of parents who were disappointed that their child no longer pursued the sport that they loved. And I think it causes a rift at home. And I've said to parents, like, if you want them to pursue your sport, you've got to be supportive all the way through. Make sure you're there for them and help them get as good as they potentially can in their chosen sport.
When looking at the athletes that make the top level, like in professional sports, they normally have that parent that is so dedicated to them, and they put like even their life on hold to help their child pursue their career. Do you think there's ever a time with athletes that they feel like this pressure from their parents because it's like it's basically all on me because they left their job aside and they focusing on me and letting me achieve my dream, or if it's just even if it's the parents' dream at the same time?
Sure. That's a very tricky question. And, I talk to lots of parents who think they want their child to do well. I used to do some seminars for Sport Manitoba for parents, particularly hockey parents who'd been evicted from an arena because they just kind of got too loud, too aggressive. And I've often started the seminar by saying to them, how many of you think your child is going to the NHL? And initially, one or two hands go up. And then I see people looking around saying, well, geez, if your kid's going, my kid's definitely going. I've never had less than half the room put their hands up. And the reality is, if you look at the statistics of those parents in the room, it would be a fraction of a percentage of kids that actually would make it to the NHL. So parents are, really don't have any clue what it takes. And I mean, you can get derailed for all kinds of reasons. Kids can have injuries that slow them down and they don't continue to move through the process. You're right. Yes, there are some parents who will move to new locations and do everything they can to give their kids opportunities. But there's also parents who do all of that and their child never makes it to the elite levels anyway.
Yeah. When talking to like kids that are growing up and may have parents that they feel like are too hard on them, or like they just don't want to like screw up and disappoint them, because I've been in that situation, not in the sense of like what we're talking about, but like just as a player not wanting to miss an opportunity but also make the best. What can you tell that kid that wants to do his best for himself, but also for the parent, and not get that parent upset, even if it's not to the extreme like we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, usually the answer is try to talk to your parents about what's going on and how they're negatively impacting things. There's lots of research to suggest that, when parents get overly aggressive or they scold their children for not performing well, they actually increase the likelihood of their children underperforming. So, if I'm yelling obscenities at my own child when they're up to bat, for instance, they're probably less likely to hit the ball than if I'm cheering and being supportive. And I think once parents realize that there is an approach they can take that will help their child be more successful rather than less successful, it often works. But somebody has to talk to the parents too, so they understand that.
Yeah, not every it takes it from what I've experienced. It has to hit a certain level for the parents to be talked to if it's like that. So hopefully that kids don't have to go through that like some other kids have in like movies and also in real life. But David, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and all your insight was very helpful in understanding this really complex issue.
Awesome. Thanks, Noah. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
That's all for today's episode. Thank you for listening. Check back in next week from the flip side of sports. I'm Noah Trenton. Catch you guys later.